welcome Dr Atif Ahmad, the Associate Professor and Deputy Director of the Academic Centre for Cybersecurity Excellence with the University of Melbourne. Thanks for joining us on our Tech and Sec Weekly.
Thank you for having me.
Look, it's a pleasure to meet you. I don't think you're in Melbourne, obviously. I'm here in Sydney, and we're going to be talking about a collaboration with Malaysia, but I don't think we've met. So it's a pleasure to have you on, and thank you very much for your time. This is a collaboration between the University of Melbourne and the University of, I'm going to have to read this, Kebangsaan in Malaysia. And this has been supported by DFAT, the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. I'll hand it over. You're just moving into phase 2 of this particular project. And this is a Malaysia-Australia collaboration in cybersecurity. Maybe just a background to the project and where you currently are.
Yeah, so this is a really exciting project because, I lead a research team that specializes in what we call, cyber incident response, which is sort of a crisis management view of, what organizations go through when they're under cyber attack. And we suggested to the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade that we could build a maturity model to measure the capability of critical infrastructure organizations in Malaysia. And the capability maturity model would look at, so how well do these critical infrastructure organizations respond when they're under cyber attack, particularly from organized and sophisticated threat actors. And this sort of model is actually really interesting, very useful, because at a national level, it can be used as a yardstick to measure the capability of banks, teleco organizations, oil, power, all those sorts of critical services that the nation state needs to be functional during times of crisis. So it's a very good tool for government, and it's a great tool for private enterprise as well to see how well they're tracking against what we would say is the Australian best practice as the exemplar.
Yeah. Well, this is part of Australia's comprehensive strategic partnership with Malaysia, or the CSP. Is this a maturity model that's been applied elsewhere, or is it unique to Malaysia?
Well, we're building this model. So we're going to build it. The background to the model is that we have been doing this in Australia for many years now. And we've seen a range of different capabilities, from what you call world-class capability to, well, not so world-class capability. And so when you go into Malaysia and you're saying, well, okay, let's build a model for Malaysia. It's looking at best practice that's set by the best, which is global multinationals, but it's going to be very tailored to the Malaysian culture, and not only the organizational culture, but the national culture, the way that they do things in organizations. So it's tailor-made for Malaysia.
Well, we might just talk about Malaysia. I was just in Malaysia a couple of weeks ago for Cybersecurity Asia, and we had Dato Amaruddin, who heads up Cybersecurity Malaysia there. What do you think of the structure? And we did talk about the national strategy versus organizational cybersecurity strategy in that context. What are your current thoughts on Malaysia's structure? Do you think they've got it right? There was a bit of discussion around a need for a little bit more legislation to, as we've seen in Australia.
Yeah, I think Malaysia is going through a transition at the moment where they've got the National Cybersecurity Agency, NACSA, and they've got Cybersecurity Malaysia that's been there for a while. And I think they're trying to reconcile the roles and functions of not just these two organizations, but there are about 20 different government agencies that have some kind of cybersecurity portfolio, which, as you can imagine, can be quite challenging for private enterprise to understand. So how do we report? Who do we report to? And all those sorts of things, which I think the Malaysian government is sort of thinking about at the moment. Our role as a team has been more focused on trying to get buy-in from these key stakeholders in government, but then to really focus on private enterprise, particularly banking and telecommunications, because those are the sectors that tend to invest the most in cybersecurity, and they also tend to be very critical. There's these interdependencies between, for example, telecommunications and power, and banking, as you can understand, is core to the way the nation state functions. So we sort of really are focused on the governance inside private enterprise, and you can say the boundary between the organizations in private enterprise and the government, and how they report to them.
So where are you? You should be moving into phase two, which is scheduled for May 2023 with some case studies. Where are you currently at in the methodology that you're applying?
Yeah, so we are at the end of the empirical data collection. So we spent quite a bit of time trying to get all of the parties on board because, as you can imagine, we're, academic team, joint team with Universiti Kebangsaan Malaysia, trying to get the key players to understand the role that universities can play in this, which is traditionally, a role that's been played by consulting firms, management consulting firms.
Mm.
So universities, in a sense, are a new player in this, and so trying to get the government agencies to appreciate the role that empirical evidence can play, which universities can bring uniquely, which in the past has been played by expert opinion. So there's expert opinion, and then there's empirical evidence, and we've sort of spent quite a bit of time explaining to them what universities can bring to the table. And once we got all the signatures on the pieces of paper, we've managed to collect all the empirical data we need. And now we're in the process of building that model. And we're going to start testing it out, getting validation with the government stakeholders. And then in the final phase, we're going to start training. We have to train about 100 cyber executives on how to measure their own capability.
Got it. What's the methodology of applying the model? Is it an audit process, a risk assessment process? Talk us through what's involved.
Yeah, so the way that we have been doing this is, the initial case studies are all based on interviews. So we actually interview key representatives of every major team or group of people in the organization that's involved in cyber incident response. And we piece together the story about how the organization's behaving. And there's a big difference between what's on paper, what's in policy, and what
Mm.
they've been trained to do, and what they actually do. And we are sort of taking a very tactical mindset, which is, okay, you're under attack. Who's responding? Who's the first response team? Which individuals? What tools do they use? What's the process? How do they convey this to the next team and the next team and the next team? And then so we build like the whole storyline from the point of attack all the way up to the executive leadership to see how the organization behaves. That's how we've been collecting the data and
Yeah.
building the model. And so when we apply the model, it's really going to be like, what are the indicators of maturity? Well, what tells us that you're low or medium or high, and how do you move up that ladder? Yeah, that's the challenge really, is to look at the organization and say, okay, you don't have a cross-functional team, or you don't have technology, you don't have a cyber threat intelligence capability, or these are the big gaps. And the implications of these gaps is, if you're attacked, you can't do these sorts of things, but you can do these other things. So how do we advise you on best positioning yourself so you can survive this attack?
I was going to say, do you do those interviews individually or as a team or a bit of both?
Oh, always individually.
Right.
Always important to separate out the people, so that we can understand the perceptions of each role in the organization. As you can imagine, you know how the law enforcement does it. You have a team of people. You want to understand what's going on. You
Separate the
separate
witnesses.
everybody, right?
That's
And then
right.
you sort of reconcile their various. That's exactly what we do. We reconcile the various perspectives so we can filter out biases and the official line and try to figure out exactly what is really going on.
I imagine that's a good process for any organization to do anyway. I'm even thinking from an auditing perspective, and getting those, or do people even understand their role, let alone what they understand of other people's role? Being an academic resource sort of research base, are they being asked the same question, or is it a bit more discussion like this where you can potentially take them and interrogate them a little bit more than what others might be?
Well, we have a very specific interview protocol. We start with a very simple question. Think hypothetically about the most severe attack that you've experienced, and now, given that attack is in your mind, explain to us how you respond from the time that you detect the attack to the time that you resolve it. And in this story, we interview for about an hour and a half. We ask them to reference every team, every process, every tool, every document, everything that they touch. And we ask the same question to everybody. Of course, we follow different rabbit holes. We explore in different ways, but we always start from the same point.
Got it.
And depending on whether you're a leader, whether you're operational, whether you're middle management, we will explore different routes. But at the end of the day, we'll come up with a big map that says, okay, we can explain to you exactly how your organization behaves, right? All the information flows, all the tools you use, all the processes that are enacted, all the reporting lines, all the organizational structures, everything. And we feed that back to the organization and say, well, this is what we see. And it can be quite eye-opening for a number of organizations.
Look, it does sound very unique, and obviously Malaysia is a lucky country to get this. Just, I'm going to. This is a benchmarking report you'll be developing for Malaysian organisations and NACSA itself, and also the MDEC, the Australian Malaysian Digital Economy Corporation, is also involved as a supporter. And we mentioned Austrade. Anything else going on like this in a sort of a benchmark aspect with other countries that Australia is doing, or is this really does stand out as unique?
Well, I think the DFAT is supporting a number of projects. I think there are more than 50 projects that are running across the South Asian region, and many of them involve benchmarking of different kinds. What's unique, what we bring, to the table is 25 years of case study experience in looking at management practice and strategy and risk management and so forth. But our methodology is very unique. We are the only research team of our kind in the world, because we kind of sit between the business management discipline and the technology discipline. And we found our own way into this space from our own experiences and developed our own unique capabilities. So we can confidently say that no other country is undergoing a tactical response capability maturity assessment.
Wonderful. Yeah. Well, look, what's the time frame for some of the report and the outcomes?
So we, at the moment, having collected empirical data, we're now building this model, and then we're going to feed back to the case study organizations where they sit on the maturity ladder and explain to them how the roadmap, that they can use to basically move up the maturity ladder. And then once we feed that back, we'll come to the big model and start the training.
And the maturity model, which maturity model are you using?
We're actually not using the CMMI version that is very prevalent because it's very prescriptive.
Yeah.
That model basically says they're basically generically here these processes and you must adopt these processes. And we're not taking that approach. We're using an evaluative maturity model that's not looking to tell organizations what to do, but to measure how well they do what they do and how to move up just using evaluative.
Okay. So we may well get a new model out of this that we can apply elsewhere.
Oh, we most certainly will definitely get a new model out of this. As academics,
as a researcher.
Yes, we have to publish this model. It's going to be a world's first in terms of this model, and we hope to publish in the top 5% journal. Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, look, accolades to yourself and your team, and also to Austrade. I'm going to give Austrade a plug. They supported us in Malaysia just recently with a Women in Security dinner as well. So the Australia-Malaysia sort of relationship within cybersecurity in particular does appear very, very strong and has a bit of longevity too there, particularly with this kind of work as well. I'll give one more plug. You've just released some other research with Elsevier, Cyber Threat Intelligence for Security Decision-Making, and you've been with the University of Melbourne for 25 years, Atif. That's an amazing period of time. You've obviously done some other things around that period. What's your general focus of your team? Maybe explain your research base and how many PhDs you've got working on with your.
So thank you for the opportunity. What's unique about our team is we are practice researchers. So we look at everything we do starts with an industry problem, a deep, not a superficial problem, a systemic problem, something that we see industries really struggling with. So, for example, this paper you mentioned is the first ever research agenda around cyber threat intelligence for practice. And in this paper, we explain what are the burning questions that industry around the world is facing with cyber threat intelligence. For example, the fact that most organizations, when they're under cyber attack, they really look at it like a maintenance engineering problem. Some servers have gone down, services have gone down. Let's basically bring them back up and bring the organization to its routine operating, capacity. Whereas what's really happening now in the future with the militarization of the threat landscape is that you're getting attacked by organized threat actors.
Mm.
And if you keep on taking a maintenance engineering role, sort of view of this, you're going to be firefighting constantly. And what we're saying in this paper is you've got to build this threat intelligence capability. You got to ask different questions. Who's attacking you? Why are they attacking you? What are they after? And until you can understand why you are attractive to these threat actors and what they're after, you won't be able to defend yourself tactically. And there's some really deep questions that industry is yet to grapple with. At the moment, cyber threat intelligence is considered to be black magic, and it's very much a few people buried deep in the technology operations division, maybe helping incident responders to make better sense of the malware that they're seeing on their networks. But really, it has a strategic role as well.
Yeah.
And most organizations don't quite understand what is that strategic role. What's amazing about this research agenda and the PhD student, Scott Ainsley, is he has an ex-defense intelligence background. And he's asking the question, we know so much about intelligence in the military. We've been practicing for years. Yeah. But it's a human-directed, human-centered process, not a technology-centered process. So what if we were to recreate cyber threat intelligence like it was a military intelligence operation, right? What would it look like, right?
Well, I would imagine it should be anyway, but we've covered CTI so many times, and organisation, even in roundtable environments with CISOs, and most organisations grapple with it. Few do it well. So that's why it grabbed my attention. I knew I was going to be interviewing you, and I saw that come out just in the last day or so. And so I'll definitely have a read, and for the audience, we'll have a link in the show notes as well. We'll also have a link to the Austrade release, which kind of explains a little bit more on the cybersecurity project between Australia and Malaysia as well. Look, just with time and interest, we want the audience wanting more. We'll have these links in the show notes, but Dr. Atif Ahmad, you're a CPP. I'll give ASIS International a plug as well. We're both CPPs, a certified protection professionals. So it's great to see you've applied some of that, as you say. Industry knowledge as well as academic knowledge is very, very important. Thank you so much for joining us today on our Tech and Sec Weekly. You're Associate Professor, Deputy Director, Academic Centre of Cybersecurity Excellence with the University of Melbourne. Atif, thank you very much.
Thank you.